My name is Raphael Bostic. I'm a professor here at the Price School, and I run the Bedrosian Center. I'd like to welcome you all to our Lunch with a Leader program. I see a number of familiar faces, but there are some, I think, who may not have been to one of these before. So I would say a little bit about the Bedrosian Center, and then give you the ground rules for today, and then we'll sort of get into it. So this is one of the programs of the Bedrosian Center for Governance, and the center is really focused on issues associated with implementing policy. So there's a lot of work that's done by people in the field, the experts in the field, to try to set up systems in a way so that we set up the incentives right, we structure the programs right, and we design the policy in the best way possible. But that's only half the story and half the deal. Once it's designed, it actually has to be executed. And too often, when policies fail, it's on the execution side and not the design side. So what we're trying to do with this center is lift up issues around how to execute and implement policy, ranging from the politics of getting it enacted, all the way through to the management, the leadership, the vision, and the delivery on the ground. And as part of that, we do this in three ways. We promote research, so we have a number of faculty members here who do some leading research. We try to lift up that stuff so that people know the latest in terms of management and how to implement policy. We have a training program, so we actually train people who are practitioners in the field, and we do this both here in California and overseas, across the globe. So we really are trying to project that. And the third thing we do is try to get people to think about governance issues on a regular basis. And that's through the events that we have here on campus and some of the things that we have on the web. I hope you're all on our mailing list and you get our things and listen to our podcast. We have a book club now, and we do a bunch of things that I think are that we hope get you to think about governance on a regular basis and understand how important it is, and as we look at our communities, to be mindful of the issues around governance and to focus on them and be willing to invest and have that happen. In terms of events, this is a Lunch with a Leader event. We designed this specifically and purposefully to be intimate. To be an opportunity for all of you to really talk with the person who is the guest for the day, rather than just listen to the person talk and then have 3 or 4 questions that you wish you asked but knew you would never get a chance to do. This is really structured for this to be your time. And so we don't really have an agenda. We don't have, I've asked the mayor not to give a speech, and rather, what I want to do is just do some quick introductions so everybody knows who's in the room. And then we open the floor up to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. I'll be the moderator, but other than that, this is really your time. I want to thank you for being here. And maybe we could start with just a little bit about your background. Doesn't have to be super extended. But just how did you get to where you are, and give us a little sense of your journey.
Sure. Well, first, thank you all for coming for lunch. I appreciate the invitation. It's always good to be on campus. I'll start off by saying I'm a graduate of the Annenberg School here at SC, and so I did my graduate work there. And the new building is fantastic, as is the new Price building. I've also had the great pleasure of teaching here part-time for the last almost 4 years now. I've taught part-time in a few courses at Sol Price here and also at Annenberg. And so I've had the chance to come back and to be involved with a lot of the issues you're all involved with. And I think the faculty here just do a great job. I'm so proud that, having been a graduate and seeing what the faculty are doing, what the students are doing, the research, and so I have a very big place in my heart for USC as a Trojan myself. Just to go back, I was born in Lima, Peru. We have another Peruvian here. And I came to the US when I was 5 years old. So I came in a very typical immigrant experience, like a lot of immigrants that arrive to the US when they're young. I came here with 8 other members of my family. We all arrived and kind of bounced around most of my childhood. We went from Norwalk to Downey to Los Angeles to parts of the San Gabriel Valley, and just kind of went where, where family found work or whatever was convenient for the household at the time. During that time, and that really was all through the point where I graduated high school, we were a family that relied a lot on each other. We didn't have very much. We certainly classify ourselves as a low-income immigrant family, but we're very strong, committed to kind of working hard. And I always say that my mom is very typical of that kind of immigrant woman that brought us here for a better life for her family. And so she and my grandmother did a great job, I think, of just keeping the family together in kind of in tough times. But I never felt growing up like I had less than everybody else, even though I did. It was a really great family to be in. Growing up, and what brought me to Long Beach, it's kind of an interesting story, is you never, growing up, expect that you're going to go to college or expect what your life's going to be like. And when we all came over, English was all of our second languages. So we were Spanish speaking. That was what we knew, and then we just began to learn the language. And when I was in high school, and I became more aware of kind of what my surroundings, we would almost 3 or 4 times every summer throughout high school, middle school, and parts of growing up, we would come to a beach in Long Beach called Mother's Beach. A few that are from Long Beach are familiar with Mother's Beach. It's a really small beach in Long Beach. It's kind of small for kids. And so we would go there, and on the way to Mother's Beach, my mother, who then tried to keep telling me, you're going to go to college, you get an education, because no one in my family had much more than a middle school education. The only way to get to Mother's Beach off the freeway from LA or the San Gabriel Valley from the 605 was to pass by Cal State Long Beach. And we'd pass by Cal State Long Beach, and my mom would literally say, hey, she'd point out and say, you're going to go to college. That's a college, that's a university, you're going to go to university. So when it was time for me to apply to college, I literally applied to one school. I applied to Cal State Long Beach because that's all I knew. I just figured that was my college, what I knew of what college was. And I ended up at Cal State Long Beach. We was fortunate enough to live in the dorms, and I just had a great experience. And for me, getting to college, while I got to college, was around the same time I also became a U.S. citizen. So those were those for me were the two kind of defining moments in my life. Being at this place that kind of opened my eyes to the rest of the world, and then I finally felt like a full participant in my community. I felt like I had the ability, I was as American, and I could be as involved as any of my classmates or friends. It really made me feel, give me a lot of confidence, to be quite frank. And while I was in college, I explored. I think I grew up really quickly, and then I really got focused on education. I gained a couple really strong faculty mentors, and I'll say that if not for those 2 faculty mentors as an undergrad, I would not have kind of pursued leadership or challenged myself. And I was fortunate that I had faculty that challenged me and that always told me, you know what, you can go to graduate school, or you can get involved in leadership. You can do more than what you're doing. And that's when I made the decision, when I was in college, I had done some leadership stuff, but not anything big. I actually ended up running for student body president, to be honest, partly on a joke, as my friend said you should run. I said, I'll run, but I didn't expect to win. And then I won. And then, so I thought that was my first very small taste. I was elected student body president at Cal State Long Beach. By then I knew I wanted to go to graduate school. I left the campus. I came to USC about 2 years later to Annenberg for the graduate program there, which ended up meeting friends for life and people that I'll never lose touch with. And then I immediately after graduate school began teaching part-time. Worked full-time at high school, and then I taught part-time at Cal State Long Beach and Long Beach City College. And that's when everything I got involved in education, started teaching more. I got a full-time job in the administration at Long Beach City College. I got invited back to come teach here at Annenberg first. Then I started teaching part-time at Seoul. And while that started happening, I got really involved in the city. This was now probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I ended up becoming president of my neighborhood association because, quite frankly, when I bought a home for the first time. And the first thing you realize, you buy a home, you start looking around, I have an investment. What am I going to do to make my investment better? And that's how it really starts. And then I started getting involved in my neighborhood, ran for the city council. I got elected to the city council. And then if I rewind essentially a year ago, I was serving just my first term on the city council, and my plan was always just to run for a second term. And our mayor decided kind of at the last minute not to run for a last third term, which he was initially going to run for. And so he made the decision to not run, and I decided the next day that I would run. And I wasn't the favorite to win, I don't think. I think the favorite to win was a sitting member of the state legislature, who was her and her family had won 23 straight elections. So they're a family. So she was in the legislature, her ex-husband was in Congress representing Long Beach, her son-in-law was a judge, and her daughter-in-law was on the city council. And the family had won 23 elections, never lost. So everyone had told me at the time, well, you're not going to win, you're too young, and everything else that you hear. And so I ran. I made it into the top 2. She ended up placing 3rd. 4 or 5 months ago, I got elected mayor. And now I've been mayor for about a little over 100 days. And I'm 36 years old. I have an EDD in education. I initially thought I would be I was on the track initially where I really wanted to be an education, not just an administrator, but I wanted to explore how education impacts particularly communities that don't have access to graduate education, which is what I was interested in. And I still am, and I always say whenever this is all done, I'm going to go back to a college and enjoy myself. But here we are. And so I'm mayor of Long Beach. Long Beach is the 32nd largest city in the country. It's got the largest seaport complex in the United States. It has, obviously home to Cal State Long Beach, which is the #1 applied to Cal State in the state of California, which is great we have the system office for the California State University there. It's the 2nd largest city in the county. It's one of the most diverse populations in the country. It's a great place full of neighborhoods, all sorts of people, huge coastline, and I'm really proud of it. Long Beach I've lived there for 20 years, and that's the story in a nutshell.
Well, that's quite a story. I've not really heard the accidental council member, the accidental mayor.
It wasn't totally accidental.
Yeah,
but
I didn't think it was really that accidental. And then you actually gave a shout out to faculty, which rarely happens in these things. So I appreciate that. So lots of ways we can go, but let's just open this up and folks have questions.
Can I have a question? Hi, Mia. Thank you so much for the sharing. It's really touching your story of your upbringing. So now that you're a very young mayor, I'm sure that you have had a lot of experiences working with people of different ages, different temperaments. So in the last 100 years, what 2 or 3 lessons have you gained as a leader managing people of these different backgrounds?
Well, I think one thing that I learned kind of growing up is I was always different. So I'm gay. I'm openly, and I've been obviously that's something that I struggled with when I was younger. I was an immigrant. I remember when I was particularly in the 4th or 5th grade, and I was trying to really master English. I remember I had a very thick accent, and that was very difficult for me because I would get teased for having this. I didn't think it was an accent. I think that's how everyone in my family talked. But I remember forcing myself to try to overcome that, and that experience kind of taught me to celebrate diversity and just, I think differences is what makes everything great. And so when people come from different points of view, even a point of view politically that I might disagree with, I always welcome that. I think that working with different types of opinions, I think is a really good thing. I think it makes democracy stronger. I think that it's good to have debate. It's good to have different points of view, and I always welcome that. And so, I think that sometimes we try to make everything the same and expect people, or we want to hear things that reinforce our beliefs, and I usually like the opposite of that.
So I think I want to sharpen his question a little bit. You're a young guy, right? You come into a major city. All of the division directors are older than you are. They all have more experience than you, and here you come waltzing in. Have you gotten any pushback? Do people look at you and say, "Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but you don't really know what you're talking about"? Has that happened at all? And if it hasn't, why not? Because that would be the natural course of things, I would think. I think that's right.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think one of the great things about getting a complete education and a graduate education is that as you move forward, you have a certain level of knowledge of the way things work. And I think that regardless of your age, going to graduate school or getting an education at a great university, being involved in research or being involved in gaining knowledge gives you a base level of information that you can use regardless of age. So I always felt like I could have a intellectual discussion or have a debate based on facts and knowledge, because I love to consume information. Even at at 36, I feel like I know a lot about a lot of things because I try to consume, I read, I get information. So I think that gives you a certain level of confidence. But absolutely, I'll tell you that when I was running, it's difficult. When I ran in the field for mayor, I was by far the youngest. In fact, I was probably the youngest by 20 years. And so when you look at, actually that's not true. There's one other guy that was maybe 4 or 5 years older than I am, but the majority of the rest of the folks were older. And so when you deal with that all the time, and I would get all the time, "Oh, you're too young," or "You don't have enough experience," and the media would cover me as kind of the younger candidate sometimes. I think what helped was that I had a strong education, which I used a lot. I actually try to use that as an advantage. So I would try to focus on the fact that I had a graduate experience, that I had taught, that I had started a small business, that I had been had a lot of experience as a city council member. But then I try to use it as an advantage. So I thought, well, they're going to use it against me, which they did. But then I try to flip it. I said, what does someone at 36 bring that's different? Yeah, okay, so I'm now the youngest mayor the city's ever had. But what are the benefits? And I would talk to people, and I can talk about creating a government of the future. What does the 21st century government look like? How do we communicate in new ways using social media and other tools? And how do we energize young people to get involved, the next generation of leaders? And so I tried to do that. But I have had moments, both as a councilman and on the campaign, where I've even had meetings. I remember one particular, I had a breakfast meeting where someone thought I was the waiter, and they were meeting me for lunch. And that's happened to me oftentimes. They come up to you and they're like, "Oh, can I take my order?" And I said, "Oh," I said, "I'm Robert Garcia. I'm here to meet you." And they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." So I get that I get that, and that's okay. But you just kind of get used to it. You get used to it. It's part of, it's been in my DNA for a long time, and I think that we shouldn't regard people, regardless of their age, that's not a good reason for me. So
just as a point for everyone, do not ask random people, will they take your order? just let them ask, can I take your order first?
And that's happened to me multiple times in my life, by the way. So I'm sure it has to a lot of people.
Other questions? Yes.
So I'd like to hear your position on minimum wage. There are campaigns across the country right now to raise minimum wage, and election results last week, in various areas across the country voted to raise the minimum wage, and I'd just like to hear what your position on that is and any potential, policy.
Sure. I have Councilwoman Mungo over here. She's like, "What is your position?" So let me tell you. So one, I was reading something the other day, which I think is so telling that 50 years ago, America's largest job producer was GM, and the average wage at GM was $50 an hour. Today, our largest producer of jobs is Walmart, and the national average wage is $8. So I think when you look, that statistic in itself is should cause heartburn to anyone, regardless of politically where people are at. When I was on the council, I supported a ballot measure to raise the living wage for hotel and convention center and airport, kind of the tourism and travel industry folks. I supported a living wage that was on the ballot, and I also voted for it at the city council. And so from a policy point of view, I do support when you're able to raise a wage in a reasonable and responsible way that won't be a detriment to the economy that you're working in. I think you should absolutely make that decision. Is the minimum wage today in the country, the federal minimum wage, too low? Absolutely. Should the wage even be higher in the state of California? I believe it should. I know that it's going up over the next few years. To the larger point, right now there's a movement in Los Angeles and a lot of other cities to raise the minimum wage. In some cases, there's a discussion to raise it to $15. Mayor Garcetti has proposed to raise it to $13.25 over 3 years. Other cities, Pasadena, Santa Monica, Glendale, and a few others are right now debating whether or not to raise the minimum wage and what it should be raised to. Seattle went to 15. San Francisco, I think, went to 15. I think San Diego went to 15. So it's happening. I mean, what's happening is cities are now taking on that challenge. So back to Long Beach. Right now, my position has been that I've been mayor for 100 days. Do I think that there's an opportunity for us to have a discussion sometime in the next year or two about what the minimum wage should be in Long Beach? Absolutely. Do I personally think that the minimum wage should be higher? I do. Is that something that is at the top of the agenda that the council and I are discussing? It's not. And the reason is because we have 3 or 4 or 5 really big issues that we're dealing with right now. But I'll tell you this, if Los Angeles increases to $13.25 or more, and all the other cities in LA County do, and the Board of Supervisors is also debating whether they're going to do a minimum wage increase in different parts of unincorporated areas as well. What I think is not beneficial to Long Beach is to be this second largest city in the county where wages have risen everywhere else, and then we become this poverty pocket where our wages are not where other wages are in the area. And so that is a honest discussion that we're going to have in Long Beach. We're not having it right now. I don't expect we're going to have it anytime in the next few months or near future, but we will have it. With that, I think it's important to note that Long Beach, like a lot of our cities, we have a poverty issue that's real. We have 20%, 1 in 5 of our residents are living in poverty or at the poverty line. And they're having to make real tough choices about what to do. And so is giving someone an increase in wage always the answer? It's not. Does it sometimes hurt small businesses? Absolutely. Does it cause some businesses to close? It does. I mean, these are all facts, And so when you weigh increases to the wage, you have to weigh the economic impacts. And so what we're trying to do first is put together a comprehensive economic development plan for the city that looks at education, that looks at technology and innovation, that looks at maximizing healthcare service and what we have to see what we can do to address the poverty rate, because we know the wage issue is a much bigger debate that will happen.
if you want help with this, you should definitely give us a call. Okay. I think there are people in our building who'd be very pleased to weigh in.
Dr. Garcia, I understand you owned a news organization in 2000, and you're also a member of the Edinburgh faculty. So I'd be curious to know what the impact of communications and sort of the media and participating in the media have been in terms of your governing style.
A huge influence. So when I was a graduate student here, I became fascinated when I was in Annenberg with hyperlocal news and the way that kind of hyperlocal news outlets were kind of changing the way news is being reported and the way people get information. How at the time, how new technology was changing the way people consume the news, right? I mean, whether it's now on your Twitter feed or whether you're getting it from a smaller news source and not the traditional picking up the paper every day. So I got interested in that, and so a friend and I started a small business, which was a hyperlocal news website called the Long Beach Post. Today, it's a very successful business in Long Beach. I disposed of kind of my shares of the company before I was installed as mayor because I thought it would be odd to be mayor and to have control the press. And it's one of the kind of top news producers of content in the city, and so it's got something to, I think it has something close to 50,000 kind of online subscribers and is really well read. And so, but creating that business, and to be very honest, my business partner is really the one that created, I mean, that really is the one that really developed it. I was providing kind of articles, and while I was half of the team, he really was the one that built that organization. And he ran it. He passed away like 2 years ago in a pretty tragic car accident, and so that's kind of when I began divesting myself of it because I really couldn't do it. But what I learned is that you have to use every channel of communication available to communicate to the public. And you cannot just rely on traditional sources of communication. You cannot just rely on just the news covering things and then people assuming that people are going to get all the information from the newspaper, because they're not. I mean, I communicate extensively through social media. I think it's a very powerful tool. I get as many people that send me Facebook messages that I do oftentimes like emails to my office, because people just view that connection, whether it's through Twitter or whether it's through, I have a pretty good network of folks that I communicate with, and so I think you have to create your own ways of communicating, and I think that back to the question about age, I think that having kind of grown up in that change in the digital environment has helped me greatly.
The piece of your story that resonated with me was how you started off as head of your neighborhood association. And I think that's really one of Long Beach's strengths. We have a lot of really active people in the community. I live in the Bixby Knolls area, and Blair's great running our neighborhood. And I think what I see in my neighborhood is economic development opportunity really coming from the community. And so now, as a policymaker on a larger level, how do you see really implementing that on a more sort of formal basis, sort of empowering local residents to sort of support their activities in their communities?
You said economic development, is that what you said?
Well,
Okay.
economic, sort of general
Sure.
activities, opportunities within the city.
Well, I think, there's like a macro and micro way of looking at, obviously, at economic development. But I think that what we're trying to do is come up with, right now, a long-term view of what economic development is going to look like in Long Beach. Stacy, who's at the end over there, is one of the 9 council members that we have. And she also, what's interesting is, the council went very young this year. In fact, I think the average age is, what's the average age on the council?
If you take out one person, it's 36.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's never been like this before. It's great. I love it. Stacy's chair of our economic developments and finance committee, and one of the things that we're trying to do right now is come up with this kind of new kind of 10-year plan for what economic development will look like in Long Beach. And we are putting together, I'm kind of be appointing kind of an all-star 11-member commission to look at that. That commission and group Actually, tonight at the city council meeting, the council will be voting to restructure that commission so that we can do the things that I'm talking about. So I need your vote on that, Stacy. So, this is fine. So from there, that commission will then work with Stacy's committee and develop and present to the full city council a kind of 10-year roadmap for economic development that's gonna do a few things. One is talk about those kind of macro issues like the new economy. How is healthcare changing the way we do business in the city? What's the future of transportation look like at the Port of Long Beach? How is technology changing our workspaces? Those types of issues. But then hopefully also talk about the strength of our business corridors. Like Bixby Knolls is a massive success story. How did that happen? Because it was city investment, but also because there's great people like the Blair Cones and the business groups and neighborhood association that are doing some of that grassroots work to make the neighborhood strong. So we're hopeful that right now our plan is to develop that. Sometime in the first quarter of 2015, that plan will be presented to the council will adopt it, and then we'll begin implementation. We restructured also in my proposed budget this year. I recreated a new bureau, which is the new Economic Development and Property Management Bureau for the city of Long Beach, which will help guide this plan as well.
So can I ask, I want to ask this differently, because you made it sound like it's a big happy family and
Sure.
all the neighborhood associations get together and we all just want to do the same thing. When you're running a neighborhood association, you definitely have views and the notion of self-determination and all that.
Right.
But now you're the mayor,
Right.
right? And you have, I don't know how many neighborhood associations there are in Long Beach.
There's a lot.
I would imagine, right? And they are all going to want to push back against what you want to do per se.
Yes.
How do you manage that? Like, how are you navigating that? I know it's only been 100 days, so we're still learning our relationships, but that's got to be something that's a challenge, an ongoing struggle.
So that's a great question. So let me first just say that one of the things I'm so thankful for in retrospect, even though it was terrible when I was going through it, is that a tough campaign makes you a tougher mayor. And my skin is so thick because I went through 10 months of hell, and particularly the last 4 months, 3 months of that campaign, I was waking up, with my partner and turning on the TV and seeing commercials about how horrible of a person I was. Receiving mail into my mailbox every day saying that, Robert Garcia is unethical, or he's, mismanaging taxpayer money, or he doesn't have the experience, whatever it was. The campaign that I just finished as mayor was the most expensive race for mayor we've had. Tons of outside interest money. My opponent was a self-funded millionaire, so he spent of his own money about $900,000 on top of what he raised. So I was out in the final election. I was outspent probably 2 to 1. Fortunately, the outside groups came in and supplemented that for both sides. But when you go through this really tough campaign where it's really a knife fight, it is a life or death. Every day you're getting attacked, you're getting hit. People are saying horrible things about you. You're reading horrible things about yourself in the newspaper. People are talking about you like they know you, and you're like, what is happening to your life? It almost is lived like you're watching this caricature of yourself, and it's not really you. And you're doing the same thing, by the way. I attacked him and hit him back as much as he was attacking me, because unfortunately that's what politics is. That experience today, I'm immune to letting things that would normally bother me anymore. And I think that an important rule for me of governance is, if you're in this business to make everyone happy, you're in the wrong business. This is not the make everyone happy business. This is the, hopefully you have listened to the community, you have your own core set of values and ideals, and then I was elected to implement those. And I'm going to stand up for those. And some really good advice I got from a former political friend was, the most popular day, the day that you're the most popular as an elected official, is your first day in office. And then you got to start making decisions. and and people aren't going to love every decision you make, but that's okay. I love, there's a lot of quotes about those that make the big differences in life are those that fought for what they believed in and weren't always the most popular or weren't always, but did the right thing. And so I hope that I know what my personal beliefs are, and I don't mind ruffling feathers. Now when I read something, that someone said negative about me, I absorb it. I try to learn from it, but it doesn't really bother me like it used to bother me. It just is what it is. I'll oftentimes read and my partner always says, "Why are you reading the comment sections of these things?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I just kept reading them."
He's right on that.
Yeah, and I'll be reading these things, and I hear these people have they'll have conversations about me or something I'm doing, and I'm going, they've never met these folks, and they're just talking about how vile I am. And you just have to sit back and go, it is what it is. And so you just kind of let it brush off.
That's very zen.
It is. But I'm at a good place with it now, so I just deal with it.
All right, yes.
Glad to hear that. When you were talking about the minimum wage, you mentioned that there were a few things that were sort of higher up on the priority list right now, some of the big issues Long Beach is facing. I was wondering what those issues are and also how you determine when one is a priority and gets to the top of the list as opposed to something else.
Well, I think it's important that I kind of deliver on the things that I campaigned on, first and foremost. And so the major things for me are, and I talked about one is economic development. Our port is the largest provider of jobs, 30,000 direct jobs, hundreds of thousands of indirect jobs when you think about regionally what trade and transportation is doing. So to focus and ensure the port is strong, that we're growing, that infrastructure is in place, that trade is stable is, for us, job number one when it comes to economic development. So I got to make sure that jobs are stable, that large industries are being good stewards of those jobs and have good relationship with their employees, and all that piece is important. Secondly, I have a huge education agenda, which has really been my priority since I've been in office. There's three things that I want to achieve as mayor, and I take this from my experience, teaching in the classroom, being an administrator at a college, knowing how important it is. I'm a big believer that the single most important thing you can do to strengthen your economy is to invest in education. There is no better investment of a public dollar than to invest a public dollar in the classroom and into the education system. I'm 100% convinced of that. All the research, I believe, points to that. And for me, I look at that in three ones. One is I want universal preschool for all Long Beach eligible preschoolers. Cities are doing it across the country. The education research is pretty clear about the impacts that a pre-K education have on the ability of that young student to be able to get and succeed in college, and then graduate and become a productive member of society. So we can get universal pre-K, I believe, in Long Beach. It would be one of the single most important things we can do to strengthen the future of the city, is to ensure that there's an equal place where all youngsters have access. In Long Beach, the families with the least access to preschool are also the families that need it the most. So we have families that have the lowest level of income, the least amount of education, the ones that need to work, that can't because they have a youngster, whether it's a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, that needs some type of childcare education system that they can't afford. So universal pre-K, Seattle just passed their universal pre-K program this last election. New York has done it. San Francisco has done it. There's 10 or 15 cities that have done it the right way. We're going to do it the right way in Long Beach on pre-K. The second thing on education that's been important is this issue of linked learning and internships. I'll give you an example. So the city of Boston, their public school system has 50,000 public school students. And of the 50,000 public school students in Boston, 15,000 of them have internships. Long Beach has 80,000 public school students. 1,500 of them have internships. 1,500, 80,000, 15,000 to 50,000. So we have, and this is no different than Los Angeles, by the way, very small numbers of linked learning and internship opportunities for particularly juniors and seniors in high school. Why is that critical? It's critical because we know that if a young person has an internship, the chances of them being hired by that company or that nonprofit is higher than if they were just a cold applying. A lot of companies will hire interns that work for them. And we also know that the students that have the hardest time getting hired are oftentimes also from low-income communities, and they need that foot in the door. And so if we can, my goal as mayor is to double our amount of internships in the first year. We've almost already done that just by asking a few large corporations in the city of Long Beach to do it. City of Long Beach, that's 400 internships a year. I've asked us to double that to 800. That's an easy ask. Now we're almost there. If we only have 1,500, we're getting there. And so internships is another important piece. And just whatever the mayor can do in my role to strengthen college completion, to strengthen access to college, I will do. What I don't believe in is I don't believe in cities trying to control education systems. That experiment has happened many times, including here in Los Angeles, and it does not work. When cities try to control universities, school districts, I think that's a huge mistake. I think that cities should collaborate, cities should provide support, but school systems should be driven by teachers, by parents, and by the administrators. So we're gonna do whatever we can. So it's been education, economic development, and then some technology stuff.
So just on this, it was almost like, did you read our website in advance? Right. So we had a conference last spring called Innovating to End Urban Poverty, and we asked a bunch of experts from around the country sort of what things would be most important to move the dial on poverty. And when we asked people what one thing would they do, it was universal pre-kindergarten. Because the data show that the disparities between those who are in poverty and those who are not are large at first grade, right? And that gap never closes as you go forward. So when you get to high school or the end of high school, you're way behind. And so you're not as competitive, and your possibility to get wages that can move you out of poverty are much lower. So this is actually a really important thing. So I hope you succeed, and we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. So that's quite interesting. The linked learning is actually important too. The alternate pathways to employment. That college need not be the only way. There are other ways to do it, and that's important to give people options. All right. Other questions? Yes.
So my question is, how is your gay identity have an impact on your election and job? Is that a negative image making you look, I don't know, evil or something, or positive, like you are diverse and open-minded, or neutral, like nobody brought it up, nobody cares, and just treat you like straight people as well? And second question, if allowed, I'm wondering so how the Long Beach mayor and council set up the policy agenda, like which issues do you think are more important than others, especially in renewable energy policy? Like, do you think is there a goal to comply with state policy, or you plan to do more? Thank you.
Great. So on the first question about has being gay, how has that affected my election or being mayor? I think that I was more worried about it the first time I ran for office, when I ran for city council, and I was out already. I came out in college, but I didn't ever. I never made it an issue. Like, I was out, everyone knew, it was reported in the press, but it's something that was. I mean, for me, being gay is, I'm Latino. Yeah, I'm gay. I live in downtown Long Beach. There's a lot of things about me that make me me. So I worried about it more in the first election. In the second election for mayor, I wish I could say that it didn't have any sort of impact, because there were a few occasions where I would knock on someone's door and they wouldn't or I met someone and they wouldn't shake my hand, or so I had a few messages or letters where people would say, I would never support you because of your lifestyle or whatever, things like that. So there were instances, but I don't know that it made a difference. I think that was the extreme minority. I have no, obviously, data that proves if it hurt me or helped me. I don't really know. Long Beach, I would say generally, is a more progressive city than most. I think there's a larger LGBT population than in most cities. So I think that I had a big support group. In Long Beach, you just couldn't. I mean, it wouldn't fly for an elected official to say something negative about the gay community. It's just wouldn't be acceptable. And so I think I was very supported. If anything, I think it helped me consolidate the strong LGBT vote and base. So I think it helped. I think that helped me a lot. But I don't. So, and whether it hurt me more, to be honest, I think that the way the election went, sometimes you have to strategize on who your base is, and in my election, my larger base, what I was trying to consolidate was progressives, the traditional kind of like Latino vote, LGBT, and younger folks. That's what kind of I focused on, and so I figured that maybe if there was a stronger social conservative vote out there, they probably weren't going to vote for me anyways, regardless of if I was gay or not gay, because they probably didn't like the fact that I was maybe more progressive. And so I kind of felt like that group didn't really matter because I wasn't going to get their vote anyways.
And then the second?
The second, energy policy.
I'm helping you out.
Yeah. I'll just say real briefly that on energy in general, I'm a big believer, and I said this at a speech last week, that if cities don't get on the ball like immediately on the issue of climate change and what it's going to do to our cities, then we're going to be in big trouble in the future. You look at all the scientific data. What cities are going to be affected? Our coastal cities. Long Beach is one of them. We have to change the way we're doing energy consumption. So next year, I'm going to be working with, we have an aquarium in Long Beach, Aquarium of the Pacific, a very great institution. We're going to be bringing together some scholars, the Aquarium of the Pacific and others, to put together a really strong climate change action plan for the city, which we don't have, which we really need. So we've got to look at how our emissions, what we can expect what the next 20, 30 years are going to look like for the city with climate change, and then look about the ways that we consume energy and the way we can do a better job of doing it.
So you should definitely reach out to the federal government. There are
Absolutely.
Folks in the EPA, even at HUD, who have some models to help communities work through these things. I worked with a little of that stuff. But particularly for coastal communities, it's really important that you have sort of an emergency plan so that you're prepared and understand sort of what assets are at risk in the event that things happen. So definitely that's important. Other questions? I have one over here, and I'll get you two.
I've been working on a project at the Annenberg School called Open Data LA, and we're looking at the open data efforts throughout the LA County. And Long Beach hasn't really done that. You're talking about them technology stuff being a priority and the 21st century city, but we've noticed that Long Beach, as big as it is, hasn't quite kept up with some of the smaller cities, including Santa Monica and Culver City. Is there anything in particular you're going to do about that? Is a chief data officer position something you see in the foreseeable future?
Yes and yes. First of all, we are greatly behind when it comes to open data, and it wasn't part of the culture at the city, and I'm a huge believer in that. And I think that I'm not, it's just the world, it's just the future that we live in. We've got to be open to information and for the information to be developed and massaged and looked at. And so I think you're going to see a big change in Long Beach when it comes to open data. It's already beginning to happen. I think everyone at the city kind of knew when I was coming in as mayor that those are the kind of things that were important to me. So everyone knew that I was like the technology guy, that I liked all this kind of stuff, the new city kind of 3.0 stuff. It's really important to me. So you're going to see a big change in Long Beach on open data stuff. The reason why I restructured our technology department is for that exact reason. And so we went from, in this last budget, we used to have what was called the Technology Services Department, and it's now called the Department of Technology and Innovation. We're going to be hiring a Chief Innovation Officer in that department as well. I'd love to have a data officer. I think what LA is doing some amazing things. I spent maybe about a month ago, I went to the City Lab conference that was here in LA, which was all about open data and the future of cities and how cities are changing that the Bloomberg Foundation puts on. And we're actively competing for large innovation grants right now through the Bloomberg Foundation and others to do some of this open data work. But we think even if we're not successful in some of the larger grants, we're going to internally get it done. So and listen, if you want to help us, and there's people here,
We're helping already.
Yeah, well, no, Long Beach. If you want to help.
No, we are. Andrew Schrock, who's a PhD at the Annenberg School, is one of your residents, and he's doing a great job.
In Long Beach?
Yeah, in Long Beach.
So he's got to reach out to us. I love that.
Let me just drop one name who's been working in your city, who's been helping us. Her name is Rachel Tanner, and she's at the city manager's office, and she's just done a great job helping.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. She's great. She's great. John, you know Rachel. Yeah, she's great. Okay, good to know.
All right, you've been waiting for a while.
Oh yeah, my question is more about when you were giving your introduction, you talked about mentors in your undergraduate and graduate school being really important to getting you where you are today. And I just wondered if you still rely on mentors in your current position and how they, if so, how do they help you lead? Is that something that you still?
Absolutely. I have a mentor, a faculty mentor of mine from my undergrad. His name is Dr. Craig Smith. He is still my mentor to this day. And I mean, he was in my office last week. He is he's a scholar of First Amendment studies and is, in my opinion, just one of the most brilliant men I've ever met. And what I like about him is that he's always been a very kind of honest, really kind of straightforward person on any issue that I might bring to him. And he helped me kind of develop a lot of my messaging over the years politically. He's have a long history in being involved in politics, and so he's been great. He still is a mentor to this day. And I have I would say that my mother is a mentor of mine. She continues to be a mentor of mine. I get her advice all the time. I think she gives me great advice, actually. And so I have a few of those. So I have a few mentors that, there's another faculty member that's been a real strong mentor of mine, and I just try to keep gaining their wisdom, as much as possible.
So two questions come to mind on this. One, how did these mentorships come about, right? So did you take someone's class and then did you bug Professor Smith relentlessly after you were done so that you just started talking on a regular basis? Did he reach out to you or send you a note? How did that happen? And then I was wondering about the notion of a kitchen cabinet. Like, do you have a small number of people who you just call informally to get that input? Because a lot of times you're in the big chair now, and there can be a bubble around that in a lot of ways. So how do you stay grounded? But I want to start with the mentor thing because that's actually something that I think is important for the folks here.
For me, it was out of necessity. So when I was in college, I didn't have a support system. So I had, my family was always working. My mom always worked 2 jobs. And so there wasn't, my mom could give me good advice, but I didn't have a support system. So when I was in college, I looked to the faculty members as my support system. And so in Dr. Smith's case, he was a faculty, I had him in class. I loved what he had to say. And I just would, be a kind of pest and stay after class or go to his office hours and try to get more information. And then over time, I became a mentee of his. And so I didn't have him in class, but he just continued to mentor me. And that was, I always had this kind of attraction to faculty that were in the classroom that were kind of imparting their wisdom or their information. And so I was always attracted to faculty members, and I would connect with them and try to gain information from them. And they always knew more than I did, so I like that. And that's kind of how I kind of sought it out. And then the second part of your question was, do I have a kitchen cabinet? I don't have a formal kitchen cabinet. Sometimes I think I need one, to be honest. And I've kind of thought about should I form one? I more have people that I go to for advice. They're not part of a group, but I have people that give me good advice. I get good advice from one of my opponents who lost, didn't win, but not the one that I was in the final. I would never get advice from him. But But one of the other ones that is a long time, I always say that if I wasn't running, he's the one I would have voted for. But you know, he didn't make it to the primary, but he headed up my transition team, for example. And I get a lot of great advice, city advice from him. There's a few people in the city that I go to for advice that I think have been around for a really long time. And I don't know all the answers, and I don't know how to solve every problem with the city. And so I think you have to go out and get mentors and advice.
But that sounds like a kitchen cabinet. So most kitchen cabinets, I think, never actually meet.
Yeah, I guess I have a kitchen
They're
cabinet.
just there around, and they're in your sphere, and you can reach out to them when you have questions. And sounds like you've established that in a.
I have, but I do feel like I need more, because what happens is, and I think you're totally right. This is very different experience than when I was on the city council. You immediately, when you become mayor, and there's just one of you, this bubble immediately forms around you. Where, no offense to my wonderful staff, but they're always like trying to protect me, right? And so I oftentimes feel like some of their job is to limit access to me, because they want me to be able to focus on X, Y, and Z. And I really appreciate that, but it makes you more isolated. And so what ends up happening is that you become, now people don't email me directly, and my cell phone number is being changed, and I have different emails. And so my access to regular, to people, to me, to just our community, I feel like is more limited. And I haven't figured out yet how I'm going to deal with that yet, because I'm feeling like I'm getting more of this bubble, which in some cases is necessary for me to get work done, but my personality is not, like my staff hates that I like to respond to messages on my own on Facebook, or that I like to take calls. Like, they would rather me not take my own media calls, and I'm just used to that, So I haven't figured it out yet completely.
So the bubble is important. Because I've been in a smaller chair than yours, and even in that context, the appetite for your time is insatiable.
Yeah.
Right? And there are a multitude of people who will want your voice and your opinion, your presence, and so you guys are doing a vital thing by stopping that. But it is a double-edged sword, because you can really lose touch if you're not careful about it. I don't think you're going to have that problem. My guess is, but it's an interesting question. Other questions?
I've been with my partner for 6 years. He's actually a PhD student here at USC, so he's finishing his dissertation in political science, and we didn't meet on campus, but not that it matters. What's great is that he is a true academic and in political science. So what I love is that he thinks what I'm doing is not real politics. So what he's doing is real politics. Is real political science, which is research and all this other stuff. So what's been nice is he is this kind of, if you were to meet him, you would think, wow, this guy is really quiet and kind of shy, and which he publicly kind of is, but he's also the smartest person I know. And so, he's here, he's on full fellowship. He last year received the top PhD prize for research for a PhD student here at the university. So he's this brilliant political science mind. He is probably my best political advisor, and a lot of people don't really realize that. And so he's been very supportive of me, even though he hates talking to people, So he has his friends and family, and is very sweet and great guy. But I'm very thankful that we met before I was in office. So we met
Before you were a councilman.
before I was a councilman. So we met when we were just having fun, and I was out at a club, and he was there, and we met and talked, and I was in grad school, and he was looking at grad schools, and then we just started, and then a year later I was running for the city council, and it just kind of happened. I don't know that I could meet somebody now. It would be very hard for me, because I wouldn't first know how to date anymore. And then I just feel like it's just very hard to, I feel like our love is like very genuine because we kind of got to this place together, which is really nice. So the only thing that affected my relationship really difficultly was no one got more mad at the attacks than he did. So I hated seeing him get so upset about every day. It was like the commercials and the mail, and he hated getting the mail, and so that really bothered him, and rightly so. I get it. And then your first question was, remind me, was about.
About how you're connecting with millennials and you feel that you're better suited for it.
I don't know that I'm better suited for it. I just think that because of my age, I'm a consumer also of pop culture, huge consumer of pop culture. I watch reality TV, I listen to hip hop, I like to dance, I know a lot about just popular culture and what's going on. And so I think I can talk that language if I need to. And I can turn it, I try to turn it off a lot as mayor, but I'm as interested in popular culture oftentimes as I am in political stuff. And I can consume a lot of that information, and I think it's interesting. And I watch Real Housewives of Atlanta. I just saw it, and I can have a conversation about that show just as much as I could have about what's going on in Congress. And that's just me. So it helps me connect.
Well, you're better rounded than I am because I can't watch that. So just on that, did you, when you became a council member, did you start thinking more carefully about where you went and sort of what you were doing when you were out? And we've had a number of people here who say, Greg Smith, who was a former councilman for the city, said he would put on a tie and jacket to go to Home Depot because he knew he was going to run into people. And so the office changed how he engaged the public. Are you living that at all, or are you just doing what you do?
No, absolutely. And the hardest thing for people, I think, particularly if you're a gay in an office, which a lot of people don't realize, is for a lot of gay men, your social circle revolves around bars, and where you go is you end up going to a lot of bars or LGBT restaurants or nightclubs. That's just part of a big part of kind of the social circle you grow up in. So for me, when you come out, particularly when you're first coming out, and then you navigate and you tend to go to a lot of gay bars. Even, it's not that you want to drink all the time, but that's just kind of where all your friends hang out. There isn't unless there's on occasions maybe a gay coffee house or whatever else. And so one thing when I got on the council, and definitely now, is all of my friends, my friends from college that are 35, 36, they still all hang out at the bars. That's where they hang out. So if we're gonna go do something, or there's a birthday, we're gonna go to the drag bar or the whatever bar. And so I've gone out to bars with friends, and I've had people walk up to me and tell me, "What are you doing here?" Or people say, "Why are you at the bar? Are you embarrassed to be here?" And I had to really adjust in fact, I do less socially now than I probably ever have done, even with friends, because even though I don't really think there's a problem with it, I think other people can perceive there's a problem with me going to bars, and having a beer or a drink or something. So I try to limit it as much as possible. So it does affect you. And by the way, when I'm out, I'm very casual. So I will actually go out in a hat and shorts, and I know I shouldn't, but in my neighborhood, I will oftentimes on the weekends, I'm just in a baseball cap. If I don't have an event, I'll just be in a baseball cap and a polo and shorts, and people will stop me and they'll always say, "Oh, you're so casual," or they'll say, "Oh, you're wearing a hat," and I'm like, "Yeah," So it just is what it is.
Other questions?
Yes.
You mentioned that you didn't have any intention of running for mayor, and then Mayor Foster decided not to run for a third term, and you arrived at that decision within 24 hours. Can you walk us through those 24 hours?
Sure. And I should clarify, it's not that when I was on the council, I thought, towards that end of that kind of first term, I thought, well, I could run for mayor, but I had no intention of running for mayor that time. I thought maybe, I mean, I didn't know. I thought maybe I'll run for mayor like after Mayor Foster's done with his third term, or maybe not. Maybe I'll do something else. I wasn't really sure. So it was that I had thought about it, just not at that moment. So what happened at that moment basically was I would, a week or 2 weeks before I got the call from Mayor Foster, he had asked me to chair his mayoral campaign, to be head of his campaign as like the committee chair. He had told me 6 months before that he was going to run and likely to run, and he was going to start, but he was going to wait. He needed time. He needed more time. And throughout that whole 6 months, I just assumed I was going to run for re-election. He, on a few occasions, like wavered on always like, well, I'm pretty sure I'm going to run, but then would always call me back and reinforce that he was going to run. And I just really believed he was going to. He had done everything I thought. He was very popular. He did a great job as mayor, and I just wasn't really prepared. I wasn't really at a like emotional or financial, because it costs you a lot of money, by the way. You end up not working enough, and I just wasn't ready. But I knew when he called me. He actually called me on I believe like a Sunday night, and I was on my way home from Palm Springs. I'd gone to Palm Springs with friends over the weekend. I was coming home. I had gotten home Sunday night, and he called me, and I was just shocked. And he said, "I've decided not to run for mayor." And I remember the first thing I said to him, I said, "What?" I said, and I was actually kind of upset because I felt that he should have told me that. Like, he was so certain of it. He never once gave me any sort of room to start planning if maybe I would, because at the time I had been elected vice mayor, so I was on the council, but my colleagues had elected me vice mayor, and so I thought, okay. So when he said I'm not doing it, I knew, and the reason why I knew that I would do it is because I knew who all the people that were running. And it's nothing against them, because they're really good people, but I just knew that like they weren't the right, it was not the person that should be mayor was not in that group. And so I just was very easy for me to decide I'm just going to do it. And so I jumped in real quickly, and he literally said, "I'm not running," and then the next day I announced. And I ended up getting his support, not till towards the end of the campaign, but he did end up supporting me. And I think part of it was because I respected his time. I didn't like jump ahead or ever disrespect his process. And then it was like a roller coaster. I mean, basically it was just like a rocket ship. I'm running to having to raise, $800,000 and campaign, and it was horrible but great at the same time.
So we'll have to end on that because we're just about out of time. But this has been fantastic. I could listen to you for another 3 hours, and the questions have been really, really interesting. You have such a remarkable perspective on what has been a really remarkable experience in moving from a low-income immigrant family to going to a college, being the first one, figuring out that you needed mentors, and then accidentally winning a council seat in the mayorship. And yet having real perspective. So just listening, I had a couple of takeaways that struck me. The first was you started with your education and consuming information and knowledge and having that be the base for how you engage with people. And that's interesting. I don't actually hear people say that as much as they should, but I think it's really important. And then a second thing is this communications issue, which we are seeing play out at every level of government, right. And how we reach people. And I actually think for what we do in Bedrosian Center circles, how do we engage people to participate, to be willing to have a voice, to be willing to use their time to be active and help us do things is really important. And so we're going to try to learn some lessons from you. The third one is, the third one's actually probably just the same as the fourth one, but I'll say them separately, is you've repeatedly had a good sense of what you needed, and tried to do things to fill those voids. The mentorship, you knew you didn't have the framework, the support system, so you went and created one. And just even terms of talking about the kitchen cabinet, right? You feel like you need more, and you're going to figure out sort of what to do about it. That's actually interesting. That's a sense of of self and sort of what you are and aren't that is really, really unusual, I think. And that's the fourth point, which is I'm amazed at how comfortable you are with who you are and really grounded in terms of what the world is and how we need to live in it. It's a level of maturity that is remarkable for an old person and really super amazing for a young person.
Thank you.
So thank you again. This has been great. Before we clap for the mayor, I want to just encourage you to take the materials that we've left here with you, stay in touch with us, and we will have a number of these. I hope you found it interesting, and I hope you come back. Mayor Garcia, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.